Today's episode is one that I never thought I'd be recording, and not because the topic isn't relevant, but because of the immediate reaction I had when it was offered to me. And I'll share about that moment right when the interview starts and what that revealed about my own biases. This conversation with Paul Keable, the Chief Strategy Officer at Ashley Madison. Yeah, that Ashley Madison. This isn't about endorsing cheating, okay? I want to be clear on that. This is about pulling back the curtain on the reasons that people seek connection outside of their relationships, what that tells us about modern love, unmet needs, emotional disconnection, and the deeply human desire to feel seen and fulfilled. So Paul and I get into sex education gaps, emotional validation, jealousy, communication, the data and the stats that Ashley Madison has to share on non-monogamy, both ethical and otherwise, and even how affairs in some cases have helped people become better partners. It's not black and white, guys. And that's kind of what makes it so worth talking about. If you've ever struggled to ask for what you need, or if you're curious about the realities behind infidelities, if you're in a relationship that's monogamous or non-monogamous, this episode is definitely going to give you something to think about. Let's go.
There we go. I did it. I found it. Amazing. Awesome. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Nope, we're not monogamous. I want to before we dig into everything, I want to share something that feels really important to me is that when I got the email offered this interview, I was like at first I was like, no, that's not something I want to do. And then I was like, wait a minute. What are you doing, Alicia? This sounds like the kind of judgment people apply to you for being openly non-monogamous. Maybe I should look at that. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to have like a real conversation about uh non-monogamy, infidelity, commitment, relationships, and what all of that looks like today.
Well, I really appreciate, you having me on, Alicia. So thank you. And the fact that, you took a little self-reflection there because I understand, talking to the people at Ashley Madison, when you are living an open, non-monogamous life versus what we offer, I understand the initial reaction. That's what most people have when it comes to our business. And so what I'm really here to do is not convince anybody to sign up or convince them that we're a great company, though we are. I'm really here just to, talk about what's actually happening and answer a lot of the questions that people tend to have about our space, about our members, and what's really happening in the world when it comes to, what we describe as undisclosed non-monogamy.
Undisclosed non-monogamy. I like that. How would you describe Ashley Madison? Like, is it a non-monogamous dating site? Is it a place for people seeking affairs? Like what exactly is the platform?
So, if we go back to our origin stories, we launched in 2002. And at the time, our founder had read reports that, online dating industry was taking off. The traditional dating sites, the eHarmonies of the world, the Matches of the world, were really gaining a lot of momentum. Yet he saw a report that said up to 30% of the profiles were in fact married people pretending to be single. And so that was the proverbial light bulb moment that said, how about we create a space where those individuals can find others who are in the same situation, be a little bit more honest and transparent, ironically speaking, and take them out of the places where they shouldn't be having these types of engagements. And thus was born Ashley Madison. And yes, our tagline is still life is short, have an affair. So we do primarily market to those who are seeking something outside of their monogamous relationships, their marriage. Now, I would tell you as of right now, we've got internal data that would show us that roughly 20% of the membership would identify as disclosed non-monogamous, meaning their partners are aware and or participating in their activities. Though that clearly indicates that the vast majority of people are looking for a more traditional, adulterous affair.
Yeah. That was something I was really curious about, is if there was a shift in like what people were looking for and how they were defining what they were doing.
Yeah, it is. And I think the reason for that, just to give a little bit of context to it, is we typically do market to a slightly older audience, north of 35, let's say, compared to a lot of the more traditional dating apps. And if you know much about the world of disclosed non-monogamy, whether it's polyamory, the lifestyle, open relationships, you will know that the data shows that the majority of these relationships, the initiative was taken by the female in the relationship. It's often women who tire of monogamy and ask, to see if there's an opportunity to explore non-monogamy. But in doing so at that stage of life, particularly if you have career and kids and, intertwined families, you're not really super excited about everyone knowing about your business. And so the discretion that we offer to give people the capacity to sort of dip their toes, figure out how far they want to go, is why I think our membership is evolving.
Yeah. 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 What's been the most like surprising or unexpected reason people give for joining Ashley Madison?
Well, that's one of the things that I think people fail to understand about, the original aspects of Ashley Madison. Everybody assumes because it's affair-based that it's the libidinous man who's just, has no morals, no ethics, and he's just sleeping with as many women as he possibly can because he can. And while I'm certain that individual or individuals like that are using our site, there is a range of affairs. And so an example for that, just to give a little, background to it, is something we'd call a compassionate affair. We had a member, she, at the point where she signed up, she was in her late 50s. She was a lawyer. She was in good standing in her community, her industry. But unfortunately, her husband, was slightly older than her, had fallen into early onset Alzheimer's. And, she ultimately just was becoming his caretaker, which she was devoted to doing so. She loved this man and she had no intention of leaving and divorcing him. But that left her without an outlet for her own, intimate needs. And that's, it's a huge burden to carry. And she couldn't date traditionally. She couldn't go into, a public setting with an individual in the manner which was going to be satisfying for her. So she chose Ashley Madison. And she found, a companion that was able to fulfill all those needs, which enabled her to go back to be the wife she needed to be, the wife she wanted to be, without a lot of the frustrations that she was carrying. And I think the other part, I think, on a broader scale that I found a little bit surprising, and I've been with the company now for more than 10 years, is I've spoken to so many members over the years, and so many women particularly will come to me and say, because of my affair, I'm a better lover, mother, and wife. And I think a lot of people will find that surprising, but there's a lot of reasons and rationales around that, and so we can dig into that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm really curious about that. I think I wind up working with a lot of people, not a lot, but I've had several clients who are in similar positions where like being openly non-monogamous just won't work for their life.
Mhm.
And they have like really deep reasons that they aren't just looking to like get off. Like they have really deep reasons why they're doing it. And those are the things they're looking to explore. So I find that really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
one of the
it
things.
go ahead,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you first.
Okay, so thank you. One of the things that I do actually love about my job is if you are in the business of studying modern monogamy, relationships, and infidelity, it's a very difficult subject matter because going to a general population survey, people lie to themselves. And it's hard to get to, some really insightful truths. And so we have researchers from around the world who have come to us say, I really want to dive a little bit deeper. I want to get into the insights around people who cheat, for this, lack of a better term. And if you've already signed up to Ashley Madison, you've given some indication as to, the type of individual or the type of activity you're looking for. And we actually had a researcher from the University of Missouri, Dr. Alicia Walker, come to us. She wanted to study the rationales around why women cheat versus why men. And the results really flipped the script in terms of what people think is happening. 80% of the women on Ashley Madison in this study were in sexless or orgasmless marriages. And they would tell you they still love their spouse, they love their family, they love their life. They weren't looking to flip it all upside down because traditional advice is compromise, just deal with not getting what you want,
Yep.
or choose divorce, which is the let's blow it all to hell option. It's costly, and if you have kids, and if you love your spouse and you love everything out there, and you've had conversations and your spouse is unable to or unwilling to fulfill what's missing, it doesn't leave you a lot of options. And suddenly we became a third path where women are outsourcing their intimate needs via Ashley Madison. And the male side, I think, really pushes people's belief systems because the majority of men in this study were seeking emotional validation. And that was the rationale for the affairs. And now, if you know, delve enough into this space, and there's an old sort of story that, was run around for years where um, escorts, sex workers would often talk about how men would hire them just to talk.
Mhm.
And people didn't believe that. They're like, whatever, who's paying money for that? But when you look at this study and you listen to that anecdotal evidence, it's absolutely true. Men, as much as women, crave that emotional affection, that emotional touch that sometimes is bereft within a relationship. And if you think about it this way, we are trained as men to verbalize aesthetic compliments to our female partners. Oh, Lisa, your hair looks great today. I really like that nose ring, things of that nature. Whereas we don't, have that same sort of correspondence from females to men. Hey, Paul, I really like that shirt on you. Those glasses make your eye pop. Those kind of compliments don't happen. And so you'll see men coming on, while the relationship will likely manifest itself in a physical interaction, it is in fact that, hey, you look desirable. You are the kind of person I think is nice and I would like to spend time with you. That is what men are ultimately seeking. And I think most people, don't believe that is necessarily true or fail to really consider the implications of not having those kind of words towards your male partner.
Absolutely, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense to me. Also, add in that women are socialized to have supportive emotional networks with each other, and men just aren't. They're taught to get that emotional support from women rather than their buddies. That
Correct.
makes a lot of sense because I see the same thing in my work. Is that usually definitely more than 50%? It's the women who are looking to be more sexually fulfilled and have more variety, and often it's the men who are like, oh shit, this is a thing we're doing. I thought it sounded really cool, but now I'm in my feels about it.
Well, it is interesting because, but if you're speaking specifically to, couples who decide to open up the relationship in some realm, often a man will think initially, oh my God, this is the most exciting thing in the world because I'm going to get to sleep with other women.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. But then that also means your partner is going to sleep potentially with other men. And
Yep.
here's a reality. If a woman wants to sleep with men or more than one man, her options are going to be higher than the male. And when men get into these non-monogamous relationships, they fail to understand that. And so before you jump in, you really do need to have a lot of conversations with your partner, a lot of understanding, because the key thing here is if you're having problems in your relationship, having a child and open your relationship are not going to fix the problems. Communication is going to fix the problems. So, but people sometimes jump into these, solutions as they were without really thinking through the consequences, and it can lead to problems. Because the one aspect that people I think fail to understand about non-monogamy writ large is it doesn't eradicate your jealous feelings.
Not
Those
at
still
all.
exist, not at all.
Yeah.
But the difference is those who successfully, participate in the non-monogamy world with their partner's consent and or participation generally are very communicative. They have an open platform so that they can deal with those issues when they do arise. And they do arise on not necessarily regular basis, but they don't just come and go once in a while. And it's because they've built a foundation of communication that they're able to entertain these thoughts in these spaces. And surprisingly, and again, vanilla type people don't really fully grasp this yet, is that there are rules within a non-monogamous relationship as there are rules in a monogamous relationship. It's not just a free for all. I'm sure there are people who have that, there's anarchy as a platform for non-monogamy for some people, but I think the vast majority of people in non-monogamous relationships do have, a standard set of rules that works for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then a lot of like figuring out what those rules should be, and which I think should happen in monogamy as well. Like there's so much
Absolutely.
assumed that the relationship will be that people don't even talk about it when really in any relationship it should be let's figure out what works for each of us, and create that.
Absolutely. We actually work with marriage and sex therapist, Dr. Tammy Nelson. And she has this great concept that I really do advocate for in any type of relationship. She calls it the 5-year monogamy contract. Uh, so she's talking to more vanilla type people, but I think it applies across the board. Every 5 years, you renew your monogamy contract because when you stand at the altar, you promise faith and fidelity for better or worse, sickness or health. But you don't really define the nature of what monogamy means. We all agree that if I go sleep with somebody else other than my partner, that's a form of non-monogamy or cheating for the most part. But if I, watch pornography without my partner, if I masturbate without my partner, if I go to dinner with a member of the opposite sex without my partner, are these forms of cheating? And a lot of people will say, in fact, they are. And so if you get married at 30, who you are at 50 changes dramatically. And, you know, some people are great and they'll have these conversations on a regular basis. They don't need to wait 5 years per se. But the idea of having a 5-year time frame, I think, is a great way to sort of envision it without becoming a huge burden, but it allows time and space for you to digest. Here is who I am today. And then you have kids, that changes. I have jobs, that it changes. I have new desires and insights and thoughts. Things will change. And you have an open, trusted space to have these type of conversations with partner. You're not just springing it on them out of the blue, which sometimes can be very jarring to some people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I resonate with that. One of the things that I've learned over the course of being non-monogamous and working with non-monogamous people is that like the definition of cheating isn't universal, right? It's
Yeah.
whatever crosses the boundaries that you and your partners agree on. And I wonder, or I imagine that some of the users on Ashley Madison are likely in relationships where those boundaries aren't clearly defined. And I wonder if that like ambiguity is what drives people sometimes in
I
looking
think a
to
lot of it is
find the
unmet
phone.
expectations. I think the driving
Yeah,
force for people is unmet expectations. And I think, but you're not wrong. I think that ambiguity is something that comes as a shock and surprise, at certain points into the relationship because you get married or you partner up with somebody and you assume certain things and then suddenly, you cross a barrier, you get called out on it. You're like, I didn't act with bad intent because I didn't even think that having, dinner with my ex-girlfriend was going to be a problem. Why would that be a problem? She's moved on, she's married, but we remain friends. But to some people, that's an egregious breach
yeah,
of the relationship pact. And that sometimes can drive people to, seek counsel, advice, and comfort at a place like Ashley Madison.
yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. Um, I I wonder, a thought that came to me was if, do you think that infidelity can sometimes serve as like a catalyst for positive change in a relationship?
So I'll refer again to Dr. Tammy Nelson here because she has a great term for this. She refers to these as can opener affairs. Sometimes people go in with the intent of getting caught by their spouse to force hard conversations. And what that
Yeah,
is all about really is often one person in a relationship will go to their partner and say, I'm unsatisfied. There's something missing. Here's what it is. Here's the specifics. This is what I want to see, changed. And the partner is either not listening, is unwilling, maybe is even unable to make the change. And then the partner will then go out and have the affair, get caught, intentionally say, I was very serious about that. If you're unable to do the things I need, I will go outside this relationship to get it because it's a hard line for me. But what they're saying at the same time, and I know people struggle with this, is that I love my partner. I want my partner to be the person who provides all these things for me. But if they can't, I'm not going to leave them simply because of this one thing, but I'm not going to leave the thing either. I'm going to go get it elsewhere. And
yeah,
this is something that people truly struggle with because think about it this way. We now ask our wife or husband to be our best friend, our best lover, our financial partner, often our co-parent, our social, experience partner. They've, carry a huge burden on one set of shoulders. And, depending on, who you are in the structure of your life, that could be overwhelming for somebody. And they will seek an outlet if you put too much on somebody without really defining, who else can play these roles. And comically, we do sit in a world where we kind of embrace infidelity in a funny way, but we pretend it isn't real because we all have work wives and work husbands when we go to the office. But that's in fact a form of infidelity, because what we're saying is, I'm not getting what I need from my partner at home, so I'm going to put this on somebody else. And in doing so, you're acknowledging that your partner can't be the be all and end all. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But when we do it with intention, I think it leads to much better outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it feels like a really, really good argument that we all need more community rather than putting everything on one partner to meet every social need that we have as social creatures. Definitely. Definitely.
And as you said, I mean, the men are not, particularly Western culture, we're not geared towards providing that sort of emotional support to other men within our our social circles. It's not part of our rhetoric. We're frowned upon to a degree because it's seen as feminine. And I'm Canadian. Ashley Madison is a Canadian company, so we're a little bit different than our neighbors to the south. And I watch culture and trends, and America is clearly steering to the right, steering to a more conservative movement. And I know you express a little exhaustion with that, and I can appreciate and understand that. But decidedly, there's if not majority, a very vocal plurality of America is going towards that space. And I think it's going to lead to, more likely, better business for Ashley Madison, but a lot of frustration with the relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, both of those. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is not something that I had even like was on my radar as many things are. Ah, gosh, that's so frustrating. Cause like everything you're talking about, I'm like, my God, I wish relationships, like traditional relationships, just already had better communication built in and more like talking about what we really want rather than having to uh hide what we want or seek things in weird ways. And I'm glad that there's platforms available for people to get their needs met in all the different ways. And I'm really happy to hear that the people behind this, like you, are going like, look, here's all the things that we can offer, and doing the research or this like looking into what people's motivations are and what they're getting out of it. That makes me feel good about it.
Yeah, listen, I mean, at the end of the day, our business is what it is, and I'm very comfortable with it because you can shut our business down tomorrow, and all these affairs are still going to take place.
We're still gonna happen.
Um, but
Yep.
we provide more insight around it. And like, there's another study that I'll reference that Dr. Ashley Thompson from the University of Minnesota Duluth did recently, and it looked at the outcomes of affairs. And roughly 30% of the members she interviewed said that their primary relationship improved because of their affair. And that goes back to my original statement about, because of an affair, some women will become a better mother, lover, and wife because the stress of what's missing is alleviated. And people can they can get up on their high horse, like, moan about it, complain about it, say it's unethical. But here's the reality, it's happening. So let's deal with the reality versus your morality. And let's talk about how do you mitigate it if that's your real goal. Because interestingly enough, yes, we're the world's largest married dating app, and we're very proud of that. But at the same time, in a unique way, we are the world's largest marriage counseling service. Because if you don't want your spouse on Ashley Madison, without your consent at least, listen to us as to why these members are coming, what they're looking for, what they're getting out of their affairs, because it's often not what you think. And there's ways around that, but you do have to open yourself up to some, what might be a difficult conversation. And there's another aspect that I think goes to why women, do tire of monogamy quicker than men, why women are signing up to Ashley Madison per Dr. Walker's study is, in America in particular, but for the most part, Western civilization, sex education is abysmal. It is, we started in a world, I'm Gen X, so we started in a world where safe sex was the primary, cause. Great. So yeah, wear a condom, avoid STDs, let's not have too many teenage pregnancies. Great. Now we're in a world where consent is a core aspect of this education. And I have teenage boys, so I'm very happy about them. These are things we discuss quite, frequently. But what we don't do, particularly parents of daughters, is we don't tell them what's good sex. We
Yep.
never get them. There's no dad out there who ever wants, their daughter to know what good sex is as a 16-year-old. And I got bad news for you. All you're doing is setting her up to have a horrible sex life in the future. You are, training her to accept what comes versus what will be her needs. And you're in essence facilitating her likely infidelity, given what I just said about why women cheat. And, there's a great anecdotal story. If you know the actress Rachel Bilson, and, she's at one point like a tier A Hollywood celebrity, as you can imagine. She's gorgeous. And she was on a podcast a few years ago talking about how she never had her first orgasm in sex until she was 30. So here's a woman who had access to the most, best looking, affluent, wealthy, attractive men who were all vying for her attention. And I'm sure whoever she dated was probably wonderful people, but yet still she didn't even know her body well enough how to either communicate or achieve an orgasm through sex till 30. That's so sad and depressing. So how are, the average person going to access that or know about that if we're not communicating these things to people? And we as a culture are just not comfortable. And like as I said before, I think America's going in a way that is going to suppress even a lot of the things we've already made, inroads on. You might see consent go away. But that's a different story. And all of these things lead to people having unmet expectations when they do get into a long-term relationship, if not a marriage. And for us, sadly, maybe it means our business is going to continue. We sign up hundreds of thousands of people a month for a reason, and we're not going away.
Yeah. 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 That makes so much sense. I recently watched an interview with the author of Clitorate. I think it's Dr. Lori Mintz. And she was talking about in her research, she was finding women in college, but also up into their 30s, like 80% of them or something outrageous were not having orgasms during sex. Like just like it was an insane number that blew my mind. Like that so many women were not only not having orgasms, but had no idea that they could have that kind of pleasure having sex with men. And it's like that pleasure piece in our education is completely missing. And yes, I agree.
Well, think about it. The clitoris is the only part of the human anatomy that is designed solely for pleasure. It has
Yeah.
no other purpose, and is the most ignored part of a female body in most
Yeah.
heterosexual relationships, which is
Yeah.
insane to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. It's wild. And then we're also not taught that we can talk about what we like.
Right.
You can
Well,
tell your
and that
partner what you like.
well, that falls often into the Madonna-Whore complex because
Yeah.
particularly when you get married and certainly when you have children, so many people feel, conversations around this nature, any interest in anything other than, lights out, covers up, pull my nightie when you're down is, that's, I don't do those things with my wife, the mother of my children. That's abhorrent. And it's a ridiculous concept. Just because you have children doesn't mean your sexual identity disappears. In fact, for some people, it increases. And why would you not want to be open to having conversations with your partner? It does not mean you have to do everything they say, nor should they do everything you say, but you should have the capacity to listen. And if you're not comfortable with something, explain it and try as a couple to find, solutions that maybe achieve the same goal without going the path that was originally proposed. And that can mean a wide range of variety of activities. And men, again, if you're listening to me, I'm only giving counsel as to how to keep your partner off Ashley Madison. Toys are your friends. They're not your enemy. You're not in competition with them, guys. Learn to play well with others and you will achieve a lot more happiness in life.
Truthfully, yes. We are saying the same thing. 100%.
It's listen, at the end of the day,
Mm.
we listen to our members, we get their counsel and advice. We're moderating a community that as of now, I think we've had more than 90 million people join since we launched. This is not a small enterprise. And, people can get very upset with it. I understand, again, I totally appreciate and understand that pushback. But instead of putting your head in the sand, let's get into these hard conversations. Let's really talk about it. And a lot of our detractors don't want to do that. They just want to point to, think about it from this perspective. The 10 Commandments, adultery is the only sin that's mentioned twice in there. They want to control sexuality. They want to control relationships versus having, giving people the capacity to negotiate and have, different ways of looking at things. And I think a lot of it comes from misogyny. I think a lot of it comes from male toxic masculinity around the idea that I don't want to have to change anything because that might, you know, hurt my feelings as a man, and that can't happen. So we're just going to bury that conversation and do it the way we've always done it because that way I'm happy and your feelings are irrelevant.
Yeah. 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 I think something that I've been mulling over a lot lately is this idea that like cheating has this very black or white. Like a lot of people talk about it as though it's the very worst thing you could do, the very worst betrayal that could happen. And yet a lot of people that I work with, a lot of couples that come to me have opened their relationship because infidelity was discovered, and they're like, and we don't want to lose this, so we decided we were going to open it up and be honest about it. Now we have to figure all of that out. And I wonder, like, if we took this really huge moral value out of away from fidelity, right? Away from monogamy, then what would we be left with? Like so much more openness. And it's not the worst betrayal that could happen in a relationship. There's so much worse that could happen.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, financial infidelity is the worst. Trust me. That is the one that really is going to break up your relationship. But I get it. But it's interesting when you really start asking people, men and women look at it very differently. Um, a man will look at sexual infidelity as the worst,
Mhm.
not emotional infidelity. So an emotional affair, they're like, "Oh, okay, I'm upset, I'm not happy, but I can deal with that." But it's the opposite for women, quite frankly. Women get very upset with an emotional affair because that means it mattered. That means they cared. But a sexual relationship, and again, I'm not saying they're joy happy, but they're far more willing to forgive a sexual dalliance than they are in an emotional affair. And it goes to, the core of, who these people are. And again, it boils down to lack of discussion or communication around what are the rules of our relationship. We just make a lot of assumptions because it feels safer to do so. When we deal with, traditional constructs, that way I don't have to question myself. And I think that's the biggest fear a lot of people have about these conversations. Not so much about what their partner is interested or might want to explore, but where their interests might lie. And they don't want to, look inwards because they're a little bit scared of who they might really be. And for a lot of people, that might be terrifying because of the way they're raised, because of their religion, because of their family, just because of a million different things. And all I can say is, looking inwards, while scary, is going to lead to a lot more happiness because you will then be dealing with your real motivations and your real interests versus what you think you're supposed to do. Because if you're doing what you think you're supposed to do and your partner's doing what she thinks she's supposed to do, no one's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you're ultimately going to be really unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I I agree. Um, okay, I'm curious. I have a couple more questions for you. One, what is the most common misconception about Ashley Madison that you'd want to clear up?
But the biggest one is that there's no women on the site. People generally have this belief that for a variety of reasons, and listen, there was mistakes the company has made in the past. We can't walk away from that. But yes, there were mistakes, but at the same time, our business wouldn't have survived what we've been through if there were not also women on the site. I think a lot of the rationales behind that belief, again, go to misogyny because people don't want to believe that women are stepping outside of their marriage, that women have this sexual agency. And, good news, bad news, guys, they do. And if you're willing to have that conversation, you will reap the rewards because they will be equally, responsive to your interests and desires because you have that level of trust. So I think that's probably the biggest myth on the site. Because the reality, if it was true, then there's just really, really one sexually active woman in each little city where all these men are signing up in. And I don't think that's the truth.
Yeah. 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 No, that's great. I had put out in my Facebook group, same name as the podcast. Nope, we're not monogamous. I had put out like, hey, if you could interview someone in Ashley Madison and ask them questions, what would you ask? And one guy said, well, I would ask about how they only charge men and not women. And I actually haven't looked at your website, so I have no idea. Uh, like I had looked into the pricing structure, but he said, is that making it seem like women are more valuable than men?
No, what it basically boils down to is this: we have a credit based system. So most dating websites are subscription based. You pay your 50, 60, $80 a month, and it's an ongoing cost. Whereas you come onto our site and you buy a package of credits, and depending on how many credits, it's going to range in terms of per credit pricing. And it was designed intentionally from a female user experience because, again, any woman who's been on any sort of dating website knows they're going to get a cajillion likes, messages, connections, all the different things. It's overwhelming because men often employ the spray and pray methodology. I'm going to swipe right on every single profile, and whichever one comes in, I'll take what I can get. And it makes it really difficult for women to sort of filter through, who's a good connection, who's be authentic. So on our site, men have to be intentional to, connect with the right person. But here's a part that, people sometimes don't understand until they delve into the details is, yes, you have to use credits to connect with them. But for sake of argument, I message Alicia and she's like, hey, he seems like a reasonable person to talk to and connects back with me. That conversation then can be free between her and I for as long as we want on the platform. And here's the other part that we think is very valuable for the male side of the equation. If, again, in that same scenario where you and I have connected, we've matched and we're chatting away and we've decided to go off and have some sort of entanglement, my credits remain in the system. So whether, it's a weekend, a month, or a year, after you and I are done, and you tire me and you realize I'm not the nice person I think I am, I can go back onto the platform. My credits are there. I don't have to expend any more money, and I can continue my Ashley Madison journey. So there's a lot of intent behind it that sometimes is misconstrued. So it's not about making women, the showcase. It's about giving them a better experience, but also providing a value to the men. So we think it works really well from that perspective.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Because so you sign up on a site, you're spending the $50. Is this good relationship going to go? Is this connection going to last? And I keep spending money while I'm, having an offline in real life engagement. We don't want to waste your money that way. We want you to be purposeful. We want to have it, provide real value. And one of the other things that, again, this is just, for everyone knows, if you come on our site and you do, message somebody and we end up deciding based on your reporting, because we have self-reporting tools or our own investigation, that person was a fraudulent account. We'll block that account. We'll, ban their profile, their email, and all the other ways we can identify them. But we'll return the credits that you initiated speaking with them, so that you don't lose out on that engagement. We take care of our members across the board.
Excuse me. That was actually a question I was going to ask you: is how do you prevent or like minimize like scam bots, all of that we run into a lot in dating apps?
Yeah, it's across the board in all dating apps. So it's not unique to us, but it's one we're constantly fighting. So it's a combination of, AI business logic tools to detect as they come onto platforms. So, we can monitor from a geographic standpoint. We also have moderation. So if you're putting up a profile that says you're 5'2" and brunette, and then you put up a picture of Charlize Theron, we're like, yeah, that's not really you. So then we're going to put you in the fraudulent or suspended account. And here's the thing. We have the option now where members in North America can use government ID through a third-party service. So we don't look at your government ID. It doesn't come to us through this process, but you can then verify, and that will help you get through any sort of, if we think you're fraudulent, but you're not, you can circumvent this. And we're working with a great partner that ensures that, your information is safe. And that way you can get around it. So then you go on the platform as a male or female, and you can see which members have government ID'd themselves, because we have a little check mark there, a little blue check mark. And that helps people identify, oh, that person's obviously authentic because they've verified their account. And so we're constantly iterating. We're constantly providing information to our members. I think the key thing is with any dating platform, as with ours, is if you meet somebody online, don't jump to giving out really detailed personal information until you've, verified, some aspects of that individual to your comfort level. And so, a great example is if you meet a woman online and she says, hey, come to my video chat, that's a questionable action as a first and foremost. 2, don't take your clothes off once you get on that video chat, because sometimes men do this and understand it. It's exciting. It's fun. But that can lead to some really negative consequences. So until you maybe met that person in line and can validate a little bit about them, don't do those activities.
Yeah. 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 I imagine that's harder. Some of the ways, like traditional dating, some of the ways that we like verify that a person is who they say they are is like checking out their social media, and I imagine on a platform like this where people are trying to be very discreet, that's
Yes, it's very different.
less easy to do.
Yeah, there's, obviously when you're coming to Ashley Madison, one of the things you'll notice that is different about our platform is the majority of people don't put up their face as their profile. And that's for a very obvious reason. They're likely seeking to interfere and they don't want their partner to know about it. So if their partner signed up as well, they don't want to be seen there. And we built in tools so that you can have a public profile set of images. So it might be a body part, it might be, some sort of activity that you're interested, place, location, those type of things. But then we have a private locker where I can put more intimate images, including my face, and then I can send a key to someone I'm talking to who can then view those images. They can't screenshot them. And if that conversation doesn't progress, or I feel like maybe it's not a great match, I can retract my key and they no longer have access to that information. They can't see my photos. And so we build all these tools in there to give people that ability to sort of build trust with their connections in a way that, maintains that level of discretion. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think discretion is the key attribute to Ashley Madison in terms of why we're so successful.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Very cool. I imagine you might get some intense reactions, like dramatic emails, complaints, maybe death threats. Like, how do you guys handle that side of things?
We've had royalty attack us. We've had the King of Spain was very mad at us once. I think the Pope even was mad at us once too for something. I can't remember what we did. Yeah, that we've had government shut us down. I do a lot of interviews, and sometimes the interview is not particularly pleased with me, and I get that. We as a culture are taught from our religion, from our family, from our government that infidelity is an evil act, and anyone who helps perpetuate it is clearly also evil. So I do get a lot of that negative feedback, but that's from the anonymous, horde. What's
Yeah.
fascinating to me is that in my real life, when I go out and socialize and I'm out and about and I meet people and they find out what I do for a living, I almost never get that type of negative feedback. What I get are the questions.
Yeah.
Inevitably, if I'm at sort of social event and someone discovers who I am, they'll sidle up to me in some quiet place and they'll say, "Oh, is it real? Do people really, match there? Are the connection?" Like all the different questions that you're asking me are the
Yeah.
questions I get all the time because people are fascinated by it. They're interested in it. And it isn't that they're necessarily looking to explore it themselves necessarily, but they are really interested in it. And it becomes a very, deep discussion point. And so, yeah, I do find that, think about it this way. I'll give you two sort of interesting points. One, if you're aware, there was a fairly large documentary on us last year on Netflix. It was the number one show around the world for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's not just because it was, an interesting documentary. It's because people are really fascinated about our business. And one of the other points that I always, sort of tend to bring up is, we're a cultural reference point. There's a whole Simpsons episode based on Ashley Madison. Marge signs up to sassymadison.com to cheat on Homer. And it's funny, but think about it from that perspective. A show that has really captured the cultural zeitgeist for over the past, 30 years and constantly is looked back to it, as a way to predict the future, put us into an episode. Why? Why is that? Because our culture is so interested in the space, but we're so afraid of having the conversations. We use humor or we use anger as avenues to approach it and digest it without actually having to delve into it in an authentic manner, like you're doing. Thank you.
Of course. Of course. With everything that you've learned in your role, what is one piece of relationship advice that you'd give to someone in a long-term partnership?
One piece of advice, say the hard thing. Say the hard thing with compassion and empathy, because holding on to that, I heard something the other day, and it really struck me, is when you're in a relationship, there'll be moments of anger. They will peak, yet they will almost always subside. When there is moments of joy, they peak and they're amazing, but they will subside as well. But when there's contempt, that doesn't go away. And contempt is bred from often a lack of communication because I'm unwilling to confront the thing that's bothering me. So I might be angry at the moment about the thing, but if I don't communicate it, that will evolve into contempt for the person because the thing that I need change, the thing that I want addressed, I've been unwilling to address because I'm so afraid potentially of the reaction. And the same on my partner. So something I'm doing or done that, evolves into contempt. And once contempt seeps into your relationship, it is very hard to remove that. And so you can manage anger, you can manage joy, you can manage a lot of things. But contempt, no relationship, I believe, can survive. And so say the hard thing, but do so with empathy, do so with compassion. And I think it doesn't mean you will ultimately end up in the place you will, but maybe that place wasn't meant to be with that person.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. I really love that. It's kind of what everything I say comes back to.
That
Just got to say the things. Doesn't mean you have to do the things, but you have to say the things.
you gotta say the things. Yeah. Listen, it's easy for me to stand here on my little couch and say to the world these elements because it's just as difficult for me. It's not an easy task. There's no part where where you're having a deep desire for either change within yourself, change with the relationship, or change within your partner, because you're not necessarily afraid of the rejection. I don't actually believe rejection is what makes people afraid. I think what makes most people afraid is shame. They're
Yeah.
so terrified that their partner is not just going to say no to their request, they're going to shame them from the request. And often that's what also can lead to infidelity because if I, have some, sexual activity that I want to participate in, but I'm so terrified to ask my partner, not just because she'll say no, but because she'll shame me for this desire. It's so much easier to go to a complete stranger. 'Cause the stranger can shame me. I don't care. I have nothing with them. There's no connection to them. So that doesn't hurt or doesn't hurt
Mhm.
as much. But having your lifelong partner, the person you love and trust the most, say to you that, Paul, you're a horrible human being for thinking that, and I now judge you. Oh, that's gutting. And I think
I
that
hate.
fear is the foundational piece to why so many people do end up on places like Ashley Madison, or more importantly, end up lying and going on Tinder, pretending to be single when in fact they're married. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of those elements are the underlying, rationales as to why our business continues to be so successful.
Yeah. 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 That makes a lot of sense. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to share?
No, listen, I am just so excited to, get this opportunity. It was so fantastic meeting you and great that you're receptive sort of to the information. I don't think you're going to suddenly sign up. But I think, your listeners are going to be informed about, what is in fact going on. And for those of your members who are, participate or interested in the non-monogamous lifestyle with their partner, I do say that, our platform is designed very much for this audience because you control the experience so much more. I know we have couples who use the platform collectively to find different partners and other couples. And I think, 5, 10 years from now, that's going to be a much bigger portion of our business because I think that's where monogamy is going in Western culture.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. I know, my husband and I, when we met, we've never been monogamous together, but when we met, we started out swinging and trying to meet other people, like meet other couples and or other people who were open. It was really hard. It's like, where do you go? And we would find websites that were just hard to navigate, and it was so hard to tell. Are people being honest? Are they not? Like, it was literally terrifying. Like, "Oh my god, we're gonna go meet up with a stranger, I know nothing about them," and like, it was
Yeah.
so nerve-wracking. So,
Yeah. It's a very
but
daunting
people wanna do it.
enterprise. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's why, we've built our system so you can do that communication. You can vet the people. You can do it in a way where, there's clearly some indication if you're already on Ashley Madison that you're open to a lot of spaces versus going to some of the traditional sites. And there are other options out there, and I appreciate all the different spaces, but not all of them are predicated on discretion. A lot of them are predicated on being transparently very open and loud and proud about it, and we have no issues with that. But for people who are exploring non-monogamy for the first time in their 40s and 50s and 60s, it can be a little scary. And so, going on to a site where the expectation is that your face profile is going to be out there,
Yeah.
that can be a little overwhelming. And so I think this is why Ashley is going to continue to be a designation or designated space for people exploring with their partners.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. I came into this with a lot of assumptions, and it's really clear to me that so much of this comes back to like unmet needs and fears and communication breakdowns. And so whether it's like non-monogamy or infidelity, people are genuinely just wanting to feel seen, valued, have their needs met. And sometimes the path that they take there can be really messy, but that doesn't make the need for it less real. So I really
Absolutely.
appreciate you sharing all of your insights. I think it's really important just having all of these conversations to reduce the amount of shame and stigma that we attach to relationship struggles and sexual struggles. And all of these conversations help people find real solutions that are going to bring them closer to feeling good internally.
That is the goal. And I think you're doing a wonderful job. And I really do appreciate you having me on today.
I appreciate you joining me. Thanks so much.
If this conversation got you thinking, learning, or maybe even squirming a little, I would love for you to take a moment to rate, review, follow the show. It helps people find these kind of real nuanced conversations about love and relationships and everything in between. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button so that you don't miss the next episode. I have lots more juicy, thoughtful chats coming your way. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.